video features an interview with Natalie Sisson, who you probably know as the Suitcase entrepreneur. She is a founder, best-selling author, sought-after speaker, and according to the Huffington Post in 2017, one of the 50 must-follow women entrepreneurs online. After 8 years in the corporate world, she left her high-paying job in business development to join the entrepreneurial world as a co-founder of a tech startup in Canada. But she wanted even more freedom and flexibility than that, so she started her blog and business, The Suitcase Entrepreneur, in April of 2010. In a few short years, she turned it into a thriving multiple six-figure education and lifestyle business, which she ran from her laptop and smartphone. While running her business, she traveled to over 70 countries, and now she teaches thousands of entrepreneurs around the world how to fast-track their own business success and design a lifestyle they love at nataliesisson.com. Her new book, The Freedom Plan, will be available in August of 2018. But I know what you're thinking. She started way back in 2010. So don't worry, I asked multiple times, how would someone build something similar to what you built today? I'm Kelsey Humphreys here with Natalie Sisson, otherwise known as the Suitcase Entrepreneur. I want to start back at the beginning, like I do with most of my guests, and you had like a pretty awesome job, pretty awesome corporate job. You've been given more responsibility, you're making tons of money, and then you were like, I don't love this, and you went for 2 weeks and you were in the World Championship of Ultimate Frisbee. Is that right?
Yeah, perfect.
So then you like figure out your life while, throwing a Frisbee, I guess. So did you have some sort of epiphany during your 2-week Frisbee experience, or did you just say like, you know what, I just have to unplug for a while?
I do love the idea that while playing Frisbee, I manifested my new life, but it was actually even before I went to that World Championship.
Okay.
So I was in this great role, as you mentioned, great money, just got a raise, and I kept waking up in the morning not even wanting to go to work, which is so unlike me. I'm a very motivated person, and even wanting to take a sick day, completely not like me. And I realized that perhaps, just perhaps, there was something big behind that. And so after 2 weeks of kind of feeling like that, I quit. I mean, most people would take a lot longer, but I was like, there's no way I want to feel miserable or unhappy. And London is an amazing city, but it can get you down too with the commuting and the hustle and the bustle, and it all just compounded. I did know of and had gotten on to the New Zealand team to play at World, so I knew I could go to that. And I just decided to quit and just move at the same time and pack up into a suitcase, having never been to Canada. So I think I did a lot of that thinking beforehand, but definitely while playing Frisbee and having that freedom, I just decided, well, it's now or never. I've quit my job. I've got this beautiful space and platform from which to launch. Or if everything goes wrong, I can just go back to a job.
Yeah. So then you're in Vancouver, is that right?
Yeah.
And you partnered up with a business partner and you guys started a startup. But I feel like that's the moment people kind of gloss over. You're freaking out in an expensive city, you're staying with a friend, you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. How did you find him? And were you living off of savings at that point?
Yeah, you're so right. You summed it up. I was living off of savings and not much. Vancouver is exceptionally expensive, like London. I don't know why I kept picking expensive cities.
Because they're awesome.
Yeah, and I was running out of money. I was luckily staying with a friend for free, and he said, you can stay here until you're on your feet. But because I wasn't looking for jobs, I was literally looking to start a business. I really probably didn't give myself enough financial runway to, knowing how in businesses it can be up to a year before you're actually making decent money, unless you're spectacular or have great luck. So I just went to every single networking event in Vancouver, and there's a lot of networking events in Vancouver, so business related. And that's how I met him, actually, over a giant glass of wine and a big platter of cheese, and we're literally at the cheese board. And I do remember my line to him, because it made me laugh, was, I'm a homeless, unemployed bum with great marketing and business experience. And he's like, great, that's the kind of, that's what I'm looking for. Wasn't my best chat up line, but it worked. And then we went out for coffee literally the next day, and he already had a business idea, so I sort of tapped into it, and I could feel the pain that he was trying to solve, or the solution he was trying to provide. So we just kind of jumped into it.
So you stayed there for 18 months. In that 18 months, were you able to then build up another nest egg for yourself, like a bigger savings? Or it was a startup, so it was probably not a bunch.
Yeah, it was a decent salary, but I was off playing Ultimate Frisbee tournaments. We were off traveling all the time.
So you were using
the rent was pretty full on, just living. So I was being frugal, but not enough.
Right, so there you are again.
Yeah.
You and your blog. So tell us what were those first steps to go from, okay, I love entrepreneurship, I love writing about it, people seem interested in my blog, to really becoming the suitcase entrepreneur, even to the point of, is that what you named it right off the bat? Did you have to lean into that?
It was called Woman's World with a Z. And somebody's like, oh, because you're an NZ woman from New Zealand. I was like, no, but that's great. I'm going to run with that. In some ways, I wish I'd kept that URL, because now I feel like it's the time of women and empowerment and
definitely
entrepreneurship. But I had that sort of feeling of being a suitcase entrepreneur at a conference, actually, in 2010, when I was busy telling people that I lived out of a suitcase, traveled the world, helped women in entrepreneurship, and somebody said, you're like a traveling entrepreneur, and I was like, yeah, and they're like, you're like a suitcase entrepreneur, and I was like, huh. So it was literally one of those aha moments when I went and bought the domain, and that's when I fully embraced being the suitcase entrepreneur, which was great, because up until then, Woman's World, as you know, massive spectrum,
very broad,
not niched. And so the suitcase entrepreneur to me was about being mobile, being location independent, packaging up your business into something that is portable, and then all the tools and systems and travel that come with that.
So before that point, how did you get the blog to start making you money?
Oh, yeah. Great question. I didn't, and that was the thing. Like, I literally I was putting so much into community work, like building the community, free content, free resources. So I actually had to take on one client consulting project, which paid pretty well, but was me almost desperate, like literally running across the road with a check to pay my rent, because I was down to $17, which was not a fun experience at all, as some people probably know who are watching.
Right.
And then I started making money through running a blog challenge, which I then turned into a PDF, which was actually a small paid price. And then from there, I built that out into a program, and just from really hustled, just listening to my audience, what did they need, researching it, experimenting with it, producing it, being skilled in it, putting out an offering, and kind of went from there.
So that first thing, the blog challenge, was free, a free challenge or a paid challenge?
It was free. And actually, I wouldn't even say it, sorry, it was a challenge. It was a blog series of 12 really awesome articles, getting people to do stuff.
Gotcha.
And then I packaged that into a book that people actually could still go and get it for free on the blog, which I told them, but just because it was in an ebook, which was cool back then, you know, back then.
Yes.
People were going to pay for it. And then I turned it into an audio book, and then a premium book, and then built a whole course from it.
Okay, so before we move into everything that happened next, if you were to go and start a blog about women's entrepreneurship today, which is so saturated, which I want to say probably anybody out there you want to do, it's probably saturated. Sorry. Yeah. What would you do first?
It's a great question. Well, actually, first I would spend more time really understanding, who am I serving? What is my unique value proposition? What's my voice? What's my value system? And why am I going to differ and stand out? And who do I really, really want to help? And then I would go about like reverse engineering what I need to do. So I'd pick the medium or the platform that's going to be best for me. Is it actually offline? Is it online? Is it video? Is it podcasting? And based off that, what offerings would I want to implement in the future? So I think I'd just be much more strategic about it, even if I didn't have much money and starting from scratch, and I would still keep the community building piece. Like building that tribe of 1,000 true fans really actually does mean a lot.
Right, which leads me to a great question. How do you do that? How do you really cultivate that community?
I think, honestly, I know it gets bandied about, you have to be authentic, you can't be anybody else, you can't try and emulate or copycat anybody else. Yes, their techniques and strategies maybe, but who you are, you've kind of got to unleash the biggest, wildest version of who you are. So even if you're an introvert, you don't have to be the loudest person or the funniest person, but you just have to be you, and you really have to play up to that. I think it sounds really simple, but it is true. When I've tried to be somebody different, or when I was still back in my corporate kind of phase, trying to branch into entrepreneurship, I was really holding back on who I was. And then when I started goofing around and doing handstands and making jokes and playing frisbee and just letting that side of me come through, people were like, oh, she's a real person. Now I can resonate. And people buy into you. They may not like you, but if they do, then they buy into who you are.
Love it. So did you spend a lot of time responding to comments, replying to everyone? So just old school communication or community building. Yeah. So people who maybe don't know you and they hear suitcase entrepreneur, I feel like they would also quickly go to like 4-hour work week and laptop lifestyle and all that. Is that true? Were you having 4-hour work weeks?
God damn, Tim Ferriss. Everybody's always like, oh, I've read the 4-hour work week. And I'm like, I know. So did I. Like, he did definitely influence my path. And I remember when I read it back in 2008 or something, I was like, oh, I should meet up with Tim. You know, I was in Argentina, I was dancing tango, we're so on the same page. But I think a lot of people have been influenced by that, and then somebody who read my book that came out several years later, they were like, oh, it's less sensationalist and far more practical. And I was like, yes, that's my style. Doesn't always mean you're going to be a New York Times bestseller, but I think he influenced me, and definitely a lot of people will think that's all the path that it is. But to me, it was much more. It was around, you shouldn't design a business that doesn't support your lifestyle. And that's my differing piece that I always held on to, was freedom first, successful business second, or it should support what you're trying to do. Not work hard all the time, because we all know Tim Ferriss doesn't work 4 hours. That was never his point. The point was you can outsource a lot of stuff and do the stuff you love. So yeah, it definitely was a time when people were just on the cusp of understanding that. And now, as you mentioned, it's like digital nomad city. Like every millennial I know is doing it. Yeah.
But for those people who are watching, do you have specific advice for people who like, I just want to be a travel blogger, or I just want to be a travel photographer. That's what I want to do. How can I make this happen? What's your advice for them?
It's a great question. I think you do. I do think you have to find your unique angle and really hone in actually more on your market. So there's plenty of room for travel bloggers, but are you looking at travel for people who have disabilities? Are you looking at the over 50 retirement market? Because they're totally different. Are you looking at solo female travelers in their 40s? Like, I feel if you can really niche down on who the demographic is and what their priorities are, that's where you're going to be able to stand out, because anybody can go traveling and write about their travels, and it's once again how they write or what they do that makes it unique.
Do you have advice for people on figuring out their own definition of freedom?
Yeah, great question.
Thank you.
That's where I'm going to next with my next line of work.
Because you've said, like, I sell freedom, and I love that. And then I was like, and I was listening, you know, when I research, I listen to everyone's interviews, so I've listened to a million, and I'm like, what does freedom mean to me? You know, like I start thinking about it, but that's kind of what you're getting at, right? People need to define that for themselves.
What does freedom mean to you?
Well, I'm trying to figure that out. In fact, I mean, like, I do the same exercises over and over again that everyone should be doing every couple years. Is like, what's my ideal day? What do I really want? Because right now I'm sort of at a turning point with the show, and do I want to go this angle or this angle? So I'm actually, it was helpful to listen to you talk about it. But so for those of you listening, freedom doesn't necessarily mean travel the world, right? It just means whatever your lifestyle is.
Yeah.
So did you have some challenges though, having a business that travels all over the world with you?
No, I don't think I did. And it's funny because I talk to people now and they're like, how did you do this when you were doing it full time? And I was like, it was just so much fun and I adapted. They're like, I find it so hard and so impossible. So that's a different set. That's like running your business from anywhere. But I think I love that freedom is unique to every single person. So I can't come up with a definitive definition, even though I'm sort of trying. But I do think there's different types of freedom: personal freedom, financial freedom, relationship freedom, societal freedom, physical freedom, political freedom. And I'm just starting off with personal freedom because that's the most important, right? Like, that's in here and that's here. So I think it differs. And as you said, when I used to say that I traveled and lived out of a suitcase, some people were like, that's amazing. And others were like, that sounds terrible. So now that I don't live out of a suitcase and I live on this beautiful property and I have a puppy and chickens and nature, it's a different type of freedom. It's a very contented, grounded, beautiful type of freedom that I didn't want a couple of years ago. And now I couldn't think of anything better. So freedom changes and it evolves just like we do.
So now as things are evolving, you know, the Suitcase Entrepreneur is such a great name, but it did have all those connotations and stuff to it. Would you still go back and come up with a strong name like that, or do you wish you had made it all around your first and last name, like just the Natalie Sisson
No,
brand?
I would still start with a brand because it's a personal brand, and yes, I am unfortunately too much of the Suitcase Entrepreneur, but it doesn't mean that somebody else can't come in and take that over and carry the torch. And I don't know if I would have been ready to be Natalie Sisson, Natalie Sisson just by myself back then, because it's quite big stepping out into your own brand and saying, here I am, I'm a thought leader. I didn't feel like I was a thought leader back then because I was experimenting and figuring stuff out. Now I'm happy to, and now I'm happy to sort of break free of that because it gives me much more freedom and expanse. So I don't want to be going niche. I want to be able to do what I want to do and talk about that and get the message out there and help lots more people.
Love it. So looking back over this whole journey, which for you has been super unique. I mean, you've been into over 60 countries.
Yeah, 70.
Over 70 countries in your journeys, and been able to run a growing, thriving online business while doing that. What was the what's been the best part and the worst part?
Okay, worst part would just be time zones, man. And I have to say, when you're speaking with Americans and clients and customers, they just don't know any time zone often outside their own country. So missing time zones, missed planes, jet lag, all that stuff, just part and parcel of being on the road, and adapting to that all the time would probably be the worst part, quite honestly. So nothing major. And then best part, it really becomes relevant when I come to something like FinCon, that I have friends all around the world and community members all around the world. So I just feel really blessed that I feel like the world is my oyster and I'm a citizen of the world and I can kind of fit in anywhere. And just having that connection and that community is amazing. That's been hands down the best thing, because that lasts well beyond any business, right? Like the community that you build and the connections.
Yeah, so great. So before I'll transition and put this piece back in a little bit earlier, but as you were growing your blog and you started going into online courses and online programs, which is a transition, and again, today, much more saturated. So someone today who is starting their first online course or online program, what's your advice to them?
Don't start an online course or program. No, I'm being cheeky. I read a fantastic article the other day about how this has become so saturated, and in some part it's like our fault, if you can say it's a fault, because a lot of us were first out there doing it and everybody copies and emulates. But this lady had just summed it up so well. She said, you've almost got to get back to basics. You've got to get back to caring about your community and your customers and asking them all the time what matters to you, what's important, and then creating for them. And I'm a big believer that, courses, it's actually been proven that only 3% of people will ever complete a course. And I don't want people spending money on my stuff if they're not going to implement. So I've actually gone more into creating experiences and what I call freedom labs, which are live sort of doing workshops almost, where people turn up to live calls and we do the work. That's just me because I'm a big action and an implementer or action taker. But I think you just have to keep defining, people are busy, they're over consuming. What's the best way to sort of get in front of them and make it so valuable that they absolutely love it? And for me, big ass courses these days aren't as useful as micro habit changes, implementation, and just learning in snippets, because we still have the same time, but we're just not using it as effectively. So sure, you can create a course or program, but make it really unique and different, and make sure that it's actually useful and people are getting something out of it.
So all entrepreneurship, someone watching, they're like, I really want to pull the trigger. I want to go out on my own. I want to quit my corporate job. Other than community and finding that tribe, what's your number one piece of advice for them?
I'd figure out whether you want to be a brand, which is more about being a facilitator and putting your message out there, whether you want to be a speaker, an author, a blogger, a podcaster, or whether you actually just want to build a business like app or software or a service, because those are two very different businesses, and one takes a certain type of personality, like you, and another is I feel like something that you can build a team around and actually has consequences and outputs, and you're building a physical thing or maybe a virtual thing, but they're quite different. And a brand requires so much of you and your love and your passion, and a product or a service that's not related just to you and is something you can kind of build a team and could be sold is completely different, but still based on the same values. They're just different types of businesses. So get really clear about your skill set and your capability and what you love doing, and then finding the right business actually to fit that.
One thing I feel like I should ask, because it would be a disservice, since you did travel so much, and I know a lot of the people watching travel a lot to speak. Like even me, just right now this week, I know my energy is tanking and I'm probably going to get sick when I get home from too much travel back to back. Like I'm just not good at managing it. I'm still trying to figure out. So for business owners or people hustling out there to grow a brand, and it includes travel, what is your advice for like somehow keeping your energy up, going from time zone to time zone, all that stuff that you had to figure out?
So you got to prioritize you. So, even at this event, if you need some downtime, don't be afraid to miss a couple of sessions, to go off and meditate, do yoga, sleep, nap. I think we also tend to go a little bit hard on coffee, meetings, alcohol, pretty predominant culture at conferences. So, try and resist that temptation and fill yourself with goodness, whether it's green smoothies or whatever it may be, your little tonic. I think it's just actually about, self-care first. So even 5 minutes of breathing in a corner can make a world of difference. And knowing at which point you're feeling like your energy's sapping, you're probably already, you should have done something about it before, but at that very moment, prioritizing you It can be hard, but I think just don't jam your schedule with so many meetings back to back that you feel frantic.
Yeah, so great. So now, as we talked about, your things are changing. So you kind of just announced that you're going to sort of rebrand or redirect things. So I always ask people, what's your next pursuit? So maybe explain kind of what's next for you in the Suitcase Entrepreneur brand.
Yeah, it's such an exciting time, like literally yesterday. So I don't fully know what's ahead, but I've been passionate about freedom, and that's been the underlying value for me throughout my entire life and business. So I'm essentially putting the Suitcase Entrepreneur to the side, or maybe finding somebody to run it so that I can expand beyond just being known as that, which I think I already have. But this year I started my Quest for Freedom podcast, which is actually about uncovering what does freedom mean to people? Is there a definition? How do we get more of it in our personal lives? And I've had a body of work and research that's been going in the background. And a big project that I had 2 years ago that I put aside because I was so scared of how big the vision was. So I'm kind of coming back to that. It's called Right to Freedom. And so for me next, it's actually about just being me, stepping into being me and releasing any sort of shackles, which ironically was my great business, but stepping out of that so I can expand and really bring personal freedom to more people.
All right, guys, I wanted to ask you, if you're enjoying this interview, if you would show some love. You could give it a thumbs up, you can take a screen grab and give me a shout out on Instagram. You can share it with a friend who you know will love it. The Kelsey Show is brought to you totally free for 2 reasons. One, I work my face off as a motivational entertainer. I'm an international keynote speaker. You can actually book me to speak at your event, your conference, your meetup, your book club, your kid's baptism. I'm here for it. Just go to kelseyhumphreys.com. There's a link there on the homepage. And 2, viewers like you who support me by buying my books and limited edition swag and all that kind of stuff that can be found on the shop page. Again, just go to kelseyhumphreys.com and you'll find it there. Let's get to the goods on how we take insights from such a super successful person and apply it to our, everyday lives. So here are my top few keys to success for the rest of us from my interview with Natalie Sisson. Number 1, get clear on your vision. She said this at the beginning, and then it was her main advice at the end. You guys have to know what you want to build. Do you want to be an influencer where all of your work is tied up in your personal name, your personality, your preferences, maybe your family? People want to see behind the scenes into your life. It's your writing and message. Or do you want to build an app or have a service-based business or something that is not so tied up in you personally? Figure that out on the front end. Number 2, find your unique angle. This is especially true if you want to be an influencer or start a blog or become a speaker or have an Instagram empire. You've got to figure out what makes you different from the many people who are doing the same thing. But it's also true even if you want to have a service-based business or a local brick and mortar store, you have got to find a way to stand out, which usually comes from your own personal story. So see what your spin is that you can put on your brand and business. Number 3, make sure you are creating a brand. Now, this could be your name. If you're an author or a speaker, sometimes it's easier to start out with your own name. But if you're trying to build something bigger, more of an idea, obviously the Suitcase Entrepreneur tells people exactly what you're going to find out about when you go to that blog. And I did the same thing with my show. I waited to call my show The Kelsey Show until I had a lot of momentum and credibility. So at the beginning, I called it The Pursuit because that was clear that it was about goals and entrepreneurship and people who are hustling towards a dream, and less about who is Kelsey Humphreys and why should we listen to her. Number 4, focus on building a community. Either way, you have got to make sure that you are really serving a certain group of people, that you're supporting them, that you're fostering a sense of togetherness around your mission and message or product or service. And everyone I talk to on these interviews, you guys, does it the old-fashioned way. They started out responding to comments, sending video replies, sending direct messages, going in and answering every question in the thread. So really focus on building your community. And then make sure you're solving that community's problem. So before you start dreaming up the kind of product you want to create or the kind of service you want to have, really ask yourself, is this what's going to best serve those people? Because maybe they don't really need an online course as much as they need an in real life workshop. So think about that before you start creating the actual solution. Lastly, keep innovating. It doesn't matter what kind of business you have, you are going to have to pivot every couple years, but it's especially true if it's a personal brand because, as we all know, people grow and change. So your business, your products and services, your blog, the way your brand looks and acts and functions online will need to change as well.